Hey everybody, I'm Alex from the Session team, and this is part 2 of Privacy Experts React to Your Questions. So we split this video up into 2 parts. The first part was just general privacy questions, so if you haven't seen that one yet, make sure you go back and watch it because there were some awesome questions and hopefully some decent answers as well. And this one is going to be about sessions specifically. So if you're a big session fan or you're wondering about session, hopefully all of your questions will be answered in this video. So let's jump right into it with the first question. Will session be impacted by the UK online safety bill? Other end-to-end encrypted messaging apps have said that they are going to pull out of the UK and are obviously not supporting this bill. So first of all, obviously session is strongly in opposition of the UK online safety bill, and our feelings were really expressed in a letter which we signed alongside with other encrypted messaging apps like Signal and Threema and WhatsApp a couple of months ago. The UK online safety bill is still progressing. It is still a big issue, and it is a huge threat to encryption and encrypted services in the UK at the moment. Now, as to whether we're going to pull out of the UK, well, our foundation is not based in the UK. We don't have anyone working out of the UK at the moment, and our servers, we don't operate any servers in the UK either. Obviously, Session has a decentralized network, so it's not exactly cut and dry about what jurisdictions the servers are in. It all becomes a little bit more complex. But in terms of our operations, there's nothing really to pull out of the UK itself. The only thing that could happen is that Session could be taken out of the UK Play Store and App Stores, which is something that we don't really want to do. You know, we think and really strongly believe that the people of the UK deserve a right to have encrypted services. They deserve and should have end-to-end encrypted messaging applications available to them. It will make people in the UK more safe. It will improve their privacy, and we would always advocate for people to use this kind of technology. It is something which we see as being necessary for human rights and for people's dignity to be preserved. And so, we don't want to just abandon all of those people who need access to end-to-end encrypted services. Now, it may come to pass that the UK government or the regulatory bodies in the UK decide to ban Session and other end-to-end encrypted messaging apps from their app stores. And that would be an extremely authoritarian play. That's not something that we've really seen consolidated democracies do just yet. And if they decide to do that, I think it will cause huge public outcry. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what they're going to have to do. We're not just going to shake hands and walk away, because we strongly disagree about this. And we really want to stand up for the people of the UK. And I know that the people at other end-to-end encrypted messaging apps feel the same as well. And we're going to fight this right to the end, because it is a really, really important thing. And it's this fight is absolutely and well and truly not over just yet. So watch this space on the UK online safety bill, because I think there's going to be a lot more that comes from it if the bill does end up passing. It's going to be very difficult for services to be compliant because the legislation is just so shoddily put together. But we'll see what ends up happening. Question number 2, will Session app always be free to use? If so, what exactly is our business model and who or what pays the bills? So yes, you're right, Session is free and Session will always be free to use. And Session as it is, we will never make people pay for the app as it currently stands. Now, you are right, that we do have to pay the bills and keep the lights on. We have a team of developers just behind me in the other room who are currently working away on Session. And of course, there's also the decentralized group of nodes who need to be paid for their efforts as well. So if you didn't know, Session's decentralized network is actually incentivized by a cryptocurrency, and the tokenomic model behind how those nodes are incentivized is a little bit complicated, but what I might do is link off to some documentation down in the description, or there might be a bubble that pops up around me somewhere which shows you a little bit of that information. But that is how the server side of things is paid for. And in terms of the development side, we have looked into the concept of monetizing for power users on Session. So be offering some really high premium features that your average session user definitely isn't really going to need or necessarily benefit from, or it's just too costly to the network to offer that, such as like really large file attachments. If we let everyone do that, the network would suffer really, really quickly and badly. But if we restrict it to a power user feature, then it would be possible to offer that. Now, it's really hard to get the balance right with monetizing to make sure that you don't just create, a subclass of users, which is the free users who are getting a worse experience and are not really getting the benefits of the app. And we absolutely do not want that to happen. That is priority number one. And that's why monetization has been a long and really thought out process for us to design. Once again, there's some documentation about how it might work, which we might link off down in the description if you're a bit more interested in how that will all play out. And of course, on the same network as Session, we have LokiNet. And LokiNet also has some monetization plans, which are probably a lot more familiar to people because LokiNet works in many ways similar to VPNs, which obviously people usually would be paying for. And so we have a monetization plan for LokiNet, which is quite similar to our VPN offerings. Once again, there's quite a detailed description of how it might work, which will pop down in the description. And last but not least, we are a not-for-profit foundation, so we can and do receive donations from time to time from those very grateful Session users who are out there. And sometimes we can receive grants as well for the work that we're doing in the civil society and human rights space. So those are sort of the main ways that we try and make it sustainable. Really, we are looking to shake up the whole business model of how software like Session works, because as far as we're concerned, if you look at the way that big tech companies normally operate, there's not really a way to make that non-exploitative without doing some kind of radical shift. And so that's what we're really trying to do with Session. And like I said, if you want to learn a bit more about how the business model all works, there'll be all of those links for some deep reading down below. All right, the next question is, why are swarm messages stored for up to 14 days? And there's a really simple answer to this question, which is we need to balance redundancy with privacy. And so when you send a message on Session, what is being referred to here is it is stored in the network for a period of 2 weeks. So what that means is your encrypted message gets sent off to your swarm, which is like a set of servers in the Session network which are assigned to your Session ID. And then once the message has been sent and stored by that swarm, when you next come online, you will contact your swarm and ask for all of the messages which have been sent to you. You'll find all of those messages and you'll decrypt them and read them, and they're all on your device at that point. Now the problem is, what happens if you don't log on for a week? Okay, well, if the message had been deleted from the network, you would just have no way of ever getting it back, because that message was only stored on those servers, it's nowhere else, and you will never be able to get it. And that's obviously going to be a huge problem for people. People don't necessarily use Session every single day. If you're using it less frequently, then message retrieval might become a little bit unreliable. But then there's the flip side of things, right? So you could say, all right, well, why don't you just make it so the messages are stored for a year? Everyone will log in at least once a year, right? But then you have the potential for two things. Either the network to become really bloated with just a huge amount of messages being stored, which isn't necessarily a huge problem because the message packets aren't that big, but also there's a privacy issue with storing messages for that long. What happens if you accidentally send your recovery phrase off to somebody that you weren't supposed to, and then they're able to get into your Session account and go and restore all of these messages from the last year? Well, that would be a huge problem for the security and privacy of your account. And so we have to find that balance point of, okay, how long do we want these messages to be stored? We want it to be long enough so that pretty much always people are going to be able to come online and receive their messages, but not so long that if their account was somehow compromised, that a huge backlog of messages would be exposed. And after, the last 4 years of development, the period of time that we've settled on is 2 weeks. It's been a bit longer and a bit shorter at various times, but 2 weeks seems to be a pretty sweet spot where people are always receiving their messages and not exposing themselves too much. The next question is, can you load Session up on an iPod Touch? And the answer is absolutely. You don't need a phone number for Session, so there's no reason for you to need to have an actual mobile phone to use it. An iPod Touch is perfectly viable to use Session. You just connect up to some Wi-Fi and you are off to the races and ready to go. Now there is a requirement for you to have iOS 13 or higher if you want to use it on an iPod Touch, but it's totally possible, and that is one of the huge benefits of Session as well. You don't need a mobile phone, you don't need a mobile phone number, all you need is an internet connection. It's that simple. What should I do to make my relatives and friends stop using WhatsApp and start using Session? And I think the key to this, and what I've found personally, is it all comes back to just education. I think a lot of people realize that Meta is maybe not the friendliest company, and a lot of people obviously know that WhatsApp is owned by Meta. And so it's very easy to connect these two ideas and go, okay, well, WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted, but maybe there are other things going on in the background which I might not want to be happening. And so I think it's important to inform people and educate people, whether it's your family or your friends or people that you meet at a party or wherever, about, okay, well, why is privacy important and why should privacy be important to you? And there's also the element of, okay, well, privacy is important to me, and so if you want to talk to me, I want you to help me preserve my privacy, because I don't feel like I can be private on WhatsApp or on Facebook Messenger or on whatever other messaging app that people might be commonly using. And so I think that's a really powerful thing to say as well. Privacy is a two-way street. It's a partnership. If you're sharing information, both of you have to keep it private for privacy to be preserved, right? It's not just I'm being private and you don't have to worry about yourself, because whether I expose information could affect other people as well. And that's something that I've said to a lot of people, and a lot of people don't really think about until you mention it to them. And so I think having an element of education about privacy, and then also an element of education about Session and how it works, is really helpful as well, because Session doesn't necessarily work the same way as a lot of other messaging apps, and there are some elements of it, such as the session ID and the recovery phrase, which might be really unfamiliar. And so taking the time to actually go through and explain those concepts and help people get started and get set up, I think makes a huge difference to people being willing to stick around and keep using that tech. So that would be my recommendation, and sometimes it can take a few tries to convince people, okay, it's time to switch over. But I've convinced a lot of my friends and family to come across now, and all of them are super stoked and super happy about it once they make that leap. The last question that we've got here is, just because you guys say that your service is private, how do I really know that it truly is? And you know what? This is a great question, and I'm really glad that you asked it, and you should pretty much always be asking this question to any tech that you're planning to use. Because, how do you really know if something's private? And I'll give you the answer in the case of Session. So Session has already undergone a third-party security audit with a cybersecurity firm called Quarks Lab. You can go and read the audit report and see the comments that they've made, and that it has all been signed off as secure and properly implemented, and that Session is doing all of the things that it says that it's doing. And I think having that independent audit is super valuable, because you don't have to take our word for it. You can go and see that this firm has put their reputation on the line and said, yep, this is all good, don't have to worry about it. And on the same line, Session is completely open source. Both our server code and our client code is completely open source. You can go and look at it and see that the implementation is, the way that we say it is. There are people outside of our team who are looking at and working on that code base all of the time, people from the community as well. So you can, see that other people are working on it and no one is raising alarms. We've also been working on Session, for 4 years now, and nothing has ever happened, touch wood, but there's not been any data leaks or major breaches or security issues or anything like that. And so I think that having that track record over a period of many years really helps to say, okay, Session is truly battle tested. It has been out there, people have been using it, and it works. And that is, pretty much the best stamp of approval that you can possibly get in my mind. But beyond that, if you're more interested to understand how Session works, we say, oh, it's private, it's anonymous, it's secure, it's whatever. And all of these are really cool qualities, but if you're interested in how we're actually achieving that, you could go and look at the Session light paper, which gives a brief rundown of some of the technical elements which create those qualities in session. Or if you want to go even deeper, you can go and look at the session white paper, which pretty much describes the entire technical design of the application. And we're even currently working on a V2 to update to the most current version of session, which we're working on now. So hopefully that will be out soon. And yeah, all of this information is completely public. You can also, see our progress happening on GitHub. The team is very transparent. We're out in the open. We really care, and we're a really values-driven team. And we really value privacy and care so deeply about it. But ultimately, you have to go and do your own research. And like I said, you can go and check out all of those things that I mentioned and see for yourself and decide for yourself whether you think session is private or not. So that's everything for today. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions. Like I said, this is part 2. So if you haven't seen part 1, make sure you go back and check it out. But otherwise, thanks, and we will see you next time.